Tips for creating your wedding seating plan.
Hi, welcome back to Bride Society. I'm Laura, this is Rebecca, and yes, today we are tackling one of those tricky wedding jobs, which is the seating plan. So you've got your guest list sorted, you know who's going to be coming, but where are they all going to sit? So we are going to give some tips to if you maybe got some tricky relationships to manage, or you just want to make sure everybody's going to have a good time who comes, give you some tips with how to put that down and create a really great wedding table plan.
Yeah. And so the first thing that you need is obviously your guest list. Who are these people that you need to be able to position? And to kind of do that in any meaningful way. So you might want to start vaguely toying around with it in your mind quite early on, but you really can't do this table plan until relatively close to your wedding date. It's one of those tasks that is like a last minute task, meaning within the last month before the wedding. It's sort of meaningless to do it a year in advance because people just haven't RSVP'd yet. So usually you would aim to have your RSVP deadline to cut off a month before the wedding. We would say a little bit before that to create a buffer, because that deadline is when your venue usually asks for the guest list and your caterers. So that's when they need it. You need a bit of chasing up time. So that's that point. But as I say, you need that guest list finalised so that you can then sit down and go, actually, who is coming and where are we going to put them?
You also need to understand your venue's layout. What space have you got to play with? And what kind of tables are they? So you might just assume that the venue has round tables, but actually they have the long rectangular tables. So
a combination.
Well, yeah.
Just to really throw a spanner in.
So that is obviously a big factor in how many people will fit on each table,
yes.
And kind of the layout of the room.
Yes, because not every rectangular the table is created the same. So yes, so you need to talk to your venue. Like, not only about the shape, but the number of people they recommend on each table too, and they can also say whether that's kind of a cozy fit, whether that's spacious fit, whether you might be able to squeeze in a small child kind of thing in between, see what your wiggle room is. Sorry, I jumped on that.
That's all right. And depending on the type of venue it is, it might be helpful if they gave you a floor plan. Now, some venues which offer kind of full service will probably have recommended layouts and be able to advise more in depth about how to lay out the tables for your number of guests. But if you're doing kind of a DIY venue or a lot yourself, you might just have a blank space to work with, and it's up to you to figure out how to fit these tables in. So if you can get a floor plan, you can then work out the spacing, number of tables you might need, and then extra space for have I got enough room for the dance floor, things like that. And they probably will have one to send over.
Yeah, or as well as if you're having a DIY wedding, or like you're doing a marquee or something, and so you're very much doing it from scratch. So you've hired tables in, they've told you how many people you can fit on those tables, but you've got to figure out the layout of even how they're being put into that space. So it is also considering the flow of the room when you're doing that as well. So if you've got if you're having like a buffet station down one side, if it's kind of family style, people are like helping themselves, then obviously you don't want tables pushed too close up to that. You need to have a flow of traffic going either side, people being able to get in and out to toilets, enough room to be able to push the chair back, stand up, and someone still be stood behind you. Like those kind of things to factor in. So again, you don't want to put loads of chairs down a certain side. Consider like what the direction people are facing, because obviously when it gets to things like speeches, that's important. Who do you want to be able to like face you when you're doing the speeches easily, like with cricks in the neck. Yeah, there's a lot to consider, but yeah, when you get that floor plan, you can really start to kind of take those things into consideration.
So how do you start dividing up people to put on separate tables? You know how many people will fit on each table. How do you then work out who goes where? So you can start by grouping people who know each other, and maybe family are one group, close friends. So you sort of naturally start dividing up your long list of people into more manageable chunks. Now, it might be a miracle, and the number of kind of each group might just equal the number of people you can fit on a table, and then you're like, fine, job done, let's go home.
Easiest task ever.
It might not, so that's when you'd have to kind of further break down the groups and divide those up. But that's a really good, easy-ish start to do.
Yeah. Now, there is a slight trend out there that's developed, which we're going to raise now for debate. But it's this idea of like mixing everybody up. So you can group away, like we just suggested, but you could really blow the whole thing up. And I mean, really, if you've lost your will to live with the table plan, you just go scatter them everywhere, see what lands, and jobs are good. And I mean, if it's come to that, it's come to that, and you go with it, you do you. But yeah, some people choose to deliberately mix everybody up. They see it as a social event that you can all kind of take the chance to get to know other people, and to some degree that's true. Like if, you know, it stops those kind of cliques, or if you know you've got people coming that are on their own, you can afford to pay for a +1 for them, well, it doesn't really matter because the next person isn't going to be sat next to their partner anyway. So everyone ends up in the same boat. So that there are pros to that approach. We're not saying that there isn't. You can probably guess from Laura's face and my slight tone that it's not a route we would go, no. But we can appreciate there are pros to that. And you know, maybe you've got a relatively small wedding and you kind of know all the people's personalities that they might be kind of up for that. But I would say just, even if you would be up for that, I think try to just kind of consider, if you're trying to make this decision about, obviously you know all the guests, and like you kind of going, well, actually is that going to make some people really uncomfortable? Obviously people have social anxiety, and these can be exactly the type of situations that can be the worst for that. And even if they don't, it can be quite awkward for introverts and all this kind of thing. So yeah, it's a big social event for you. Most of the other people there are just there for you, not necessarily for everybody else. Obviously everyone's different, yeah. But yeah.
So if you are choosing to go down that route, one way you could make it slightly more palatable, sorry,
I was thinking tolerable, yeah.
Would be to at least put people together maybe that have shared interests, or that you have personalities that you think will get on well. So at least there is some thought in mixing everyone up. So there is a kind of, you do think those people get on well together. I mean, I'm assuming if all these people are coming to your wedding, all these people are lovely humans and they all care about you and you like them. So no one should be like, it shouldn't be horrible.
And they all have you in common.
Yes.
At the very least, they've all got, how do you know the couple?
Yeah. But I mean, even if you aren't doing that, but you are having to kind of have a slightly mixed table because the numbers don't quite work with the groupings you made earlier. Again, the philosophy of putting maybe a couple of pairs of friends or couples together that either know each other or have shared interests. So there are the talking points. There are things that you think they will get on well, and so it's kind of a nice experience for them during that time.
Mm-hmm. And if you have got guests that are coming by themselves, you may have offered them a +1 and they didn't have one to bring or whatever, but if they're coming by themselves and they don't know anyone, it's trying to not create a situation where they feel isolated. So is the space on a table where the other people there are more like chatty, they're more likely to kind of be inclusive and things. So I think we talk about kind of groupings, like, oh, I know these people from uni and I know these people from work and that kind of thing. But what I would avoid doing is having your group from work, there happens to be one free seat at that table and then there's randoms there, because chances are, even unintentionally, that will be cliquey. They will have a lot more in common to talk about and that person will be excluded. So if you have a few kind of miscellaneous couples, or some couples, maybe one or two other people that are there on their own, you don't want an exclusively singletons table because that's kind of weird too. But obviously, yeah, if you can match some interests, if you feel like, say, some people will be more kind of, that they're just people that find it easy to talk to anyone kind of thing, then put them next to that person. But yeah, it's just trying to think of those ways to help them kind of blend in, so they'll hopefully have a nice time.
And a major point, and one you're probably already aware of, is considering family dynamics. So depending on your background, there might be some complicated relationships in the family that are coming, like of people that are coming. There might be some tensions. So it's just being mindful that you probably don't want to sit those people on the same table if you want to have a peaceful, kind of enjoyable reception. If they're on separate tables, they can just exist in the same space but not next to each other, cause no problems, it's all good.
And keep your attendees like age in mind. So maybe sort of older guests might prefer to be closer to the top table, sweetheart table, whatever you're having, because maybe it's harder for them to hear, and in terms of like speeches or whatever, they want to hear that, but equally not right under a speaker, that kind of thing, because and or not right in the depths of the group, because again, background noises makes it harder perhaps for people to hear and communicate. And on the flip side of that, children, even if you're having a super child-friendly wedding and you love kids and stuff, chances are you still don't want to only be able to hear them when the speeches are being done and that kind of thing, or those key moments. So it's thinking again where those people get strategically placed around the room. Maybe you've got a kids' table. I've never actually seen that happen. No. I feel like you still always need a bit of supervision and
it would need to be slightly older children.
It would be,
that,
yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, and if so, I would put that further towards the back near the exit. But particularly like for parents of younger children, even babies, it's kind of go, well, are they positioned somewhere in the room where they can easily kind of get up and kind of make a subtle exit if the baby starts crying during speeches? Because it's awkward for the parents as well. Like they often feel like, oh my god, my baby's screaming and I need to get out, and then they're trapped, they can't easily get out with having to duck and dive and things. So if you've kind of got an easy escape route for them so they're comfortable, that's also really useful.
The head table. So again, they've got a couple of options even now with if you have a head table, or if you decide, no, it's too complicated deciding who's on there with us, so we're just going to have a sweetheart table, just the two of us, and everyone else can go somewhere else. But traditionally, if you are choosing to have a head table, it would be you as a couple, and then kind of immediate family, maybe some members of the wedding party, so that might be like best man, maid of honour, potentially bridesmaids, so normally parents. But again, if you've got maybe step parents or lots of bridesmaids and you don't want to single them out, you might choose to do something slightly different. But yes, I think traditionally, if you were to do a sweetheart table, you would normally keep immediate family kind of closest to that table. But really, you could probably do what you want.
And I want to say one more thing on the kids thing, because okay. I forgot, I'm sorry, was when allocating your seats and the spacing, if high chairs are required, it might be that because of the legs of them and things, that more space is required for those. So check with your venue that they have high chairs, that they have the number that you might need, because otherwise you might need to get those in, and what they recommend therefore in the spacing, because it might affect how many people you can put on that table. I would also actually just check with the parents that if they need a high chair, like what their situation is. Some of them might be like, oh no, it's fine, I'm just going to put the baby on my knee. They might have their own like clip-on thing that they want to do. So there's different things that they might feel more comfortable with. But yeah, it's just making sure, because it can actually affect the seating plan itself. I'm sorry.
That's all right. And someone else you ought to ask what they want to do. See, good segue there.
Thanks, yeah, it's totally deliberate.
Is your wedding suppliers. So there will be a certain wedding suppliers who, built into their contract, will require a meal on the day, most likely. This is usually like the photographer, videographer,
Wedding coordinator.
Yeah, potentially. Sometimes maybe a DJ. So you should know in advance kind of who needs a meal. However, they don't necessarily want to eat that meal with all your guests. So you might not need to include them on a table plan, but ask them what they would prefer to do, whether they do want to be included on that table plan in the same room, probably on a separate table, so they are slightly removed from the guests. But yeah, just they're people you need to consider. They may or may not affect your table plan.
Yeah, because I think, if obviously, but you might be in a space that only has one room. Yeah. So, I mean, they might still prefer to eat in their car, like genuinely. But definitely do check with them. So next, we're talking about like creating the visual layout. You've either got your table, like floor plan off your venue, that's the word, or you've drawn one out yourself. But this is now like the actual like positioning people around, and to make that easier, there are a lot of like online tools you can use, so you can do that, and also then you can really easily like reposition people. The one way I went was literally like got my old school compass out.
Wow.
I had round tables to draw those out, and then got little like rectangular sticky tabs with all the guest names on, so they could easily be pulled off and moved around, because obviously you don't get it perfect first go, right? And you kind of need to tweak and stuff, and you want to be able to kind of do that without crossing out, scribbling and things, and it all becomes a mess. So do that originally. Obviously then you'll need to translate that into a more written thing, because obviously sticky tabs can fall off and things, and you've got to give it to your venue, blah, blah, blah. But as a kind of practical kind of workshopping technique, that can be quite useful if you don't want to kind of go the computer route.
And something I think is quite important is to not stress too much about this being a perfect plan. So just allow yourself a little bit of flexibility if things happen to change in the run-up. Even after you've maybe printed out or had your table plan made, there may still be some slight changes that happen if people can't make it, if through illness or whatever reason. Yes, you've just got to try and, you've made this plan, it's all great, but just go with the flow if things just change slightly. The table plan is only for quite a small part of the day, probably for your speeches and probably for your sit-down meal. After that, everyone can be up and mingle. So even if you created this plan and it's maybe not ideal, you've put a couple of people on a table that ordinarily you wouldn't have done that, you would have put them with someone else. They can survive for a couple of hours. It's fine. And then they can get up later on and go and talk to other people. People are mingling. Yeah, it's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine. I say, you may have lost your mind with it at this point and just gone with it. Anyone can sit anywhere. I mean, obviously that is another way to go, is that you don't even create a seating plan, that people can just pick up an escort card at the front and pick a spot, put it down, and that's their own chosen space for the rest of the day. If you just want to be like, you sort yourselves out, I would say you can do that.
You can. If you are having a plated served meal, I would say your venue probably will not thank you for that. If you're having a buffet, there probably is a bit more flexibility in doing that. So yeah, something to think about.
We hope that helped. Or at least it helped you along the journey somewhat. If you've got any other great ideas that have come to you, please drop them in the comments below, or any sort of the online tools that we were talking about. If there are any that you found really helpful, drop those in the comments, because I say for other couples watching, that could be really helpful. So we hope you liked the video. If you did, you could give it a thumbs up, and of course don't forget to subscribe, because we're here every Friday with more content like this.